Welcome to City Life. Coming up today on the program, we chat with Smokefree Canterbury, we meet the Rural Businesswoman of the Year, art with Warren Feeney, and we introduce a new segment to City Life with CTV's Geoff Morton. But first, Geoff Barry from Sports Canterbury. It's good to see you.
Morning, Canetta.
How are things going at Sport Canterbury?
Oh, just like everyone, we have our challenges, but I think as an organisation we're pretty resilient, and certainly the sport and recreation sector are really resilient, so we're tracking through a fairly difficult time.
So where are you based now?
Well, we were at QE2, but that's a bit sad at the moment, so we call it Elmwood Heights, but it's the Elmwood Bowling Club on Heaton Street, so we relocated into a nice old 1960s building.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
From the lovely QE2 complex.
Well, we had a nice overview of the village green, the cricket ground out at QE2.
Oh, of course.
So a nice old wooden building out there, but it's been fairly badly damaged, so yeah, so we'll be in there for a wee while.
Okay. And you're playing bowls at lunchtime?
Well, it's quite interesting. The bowls rink, I think it's called a rink, outside the front of the building is pretty badly damaged, so we play on that one. They've got two rinks, one's really good and one's damaged, so we play on the damaged one. So.
Are you allowed to?
Well, it reflects our standard probably, so we go pretty good on that.
So what's the focus at the moment with Sport Canterbury?
There's sort of two streams. I think the two parts was getting kids playing sport, or getting people playing sport. Shouldn't limit ourselves to kids. So a strong focus on schools, particularly primary schools and in the east side especially. And so creating opportunities so those kids can play again. And so that was about field recovery. It's about giving teachers the new equipment or whatever they need to get the kids playing. But then alongside that, we have a fairly significant role in the sport infrastructure, because there's a lot of the main properties, if you like, QE2 and Kerrs Region, all those sort of places have been badly damaged. So there's two sort of key parts to it.
So where are you sort of focusing all the sport at the moment? Where are people playing?
Well, we've been really lucky on the green space. You know, the council's done a really great job in getting about 95% of the playing fields back up and running, so winter sports are pretty fully operational. There's been a drop in participation, but it's probably not through the grounds, it's more through the challenges that people have. A lot of people obviously left the city, but also challenges around getting around the city and the cost of getting around. So there's been some dropout in that respect.
Wow.
But really in the indoor space, it's really where we've been trying to negotiate to try and get new footprint and stuff that weren't courts previously, trying to negotiate with players or places to get new courts set up and stuff like that. So that's been part of the major effort.
Yeah. So how are you encouraging people back into sport? Are you sort of dropping fees or, you know, what? Sports
response has been sort of two different approaches. We've put in quite a bit of money. We've had good support from the government through Spark, and so we put in around $300,000 at the moment in terms of subsidising people to play. We've got some money involved with Sporting Chance, which is just you can apply in and get your pair of running boots or your subs paid. So we're doing those sorts of things, but also working alongside the sports to make it affordable. So as you say, dropping subs or changing fee structures or making the game more, you don't have to commit for 30 weeks or 15 weeks or 10 weeks. You can play a game and then not come back next week, so to speak. So a whole array of responses.
Okay, and is that working?
Participation, it's really interesting that initially it did. The participation was quite down. We had about 9,000 less players in the winter than last year. That started to come back. Okay. But then I think it's a bit like the old human nature thing. It's up and down a little bit. I think people are pretty much over rocking and rolling. And really from week to week it's really a fluctuating thing. But generally speaking, people are coming back in and playing.
So would this be one of the most urgent needs at the moment in this, with Sport Canterbury?
Oh, without doubt. I mean, the infrastructure is a long term. At the end of the day, we're going to need a new 50-metre pool or a new running track or whatever those key assets are, but that's the 5 or 10 year plan. I mean, the reality of rebuild of the city, we get into that sort of food chain and we just have to take our time and plan properly. So the key thing is making the sport accessible. And I think what we're doing alongside the sport is taking the game to the community. So in other words, in the past you might have played netball all the time at Hagley Park, for example. You know, that's a very centralised model. So we're starting to say, well, hang on, we need to take the game out into the suburbs a little bit, so people don't have to drive or get in through the city or spend $2.20 or whatever the fuel happens to be at the moment. So taking away those barriers to participation, so just making it a bit more accessible. Great.
And you've created a new role at Sport Canterbury as well.
Yeah, we've had an opportunity through funding to actually look at a number of roles. So we've got sort of three. We've got a person dedicated to EQ recovery, for one of the jargonistic sense. So working alongside the schools or working alongside the sporting organisations, so helping them out, and they distribute funding or do whatever they can. But the other thing we've done is we've got we call it young people's team, but it's jargon, working within the primary schools. So we've taken on a new young person's advisor. So that gives us another 15 schools that we can work alongside to encourage kids to play and supporting teachers to deliver sport in schools.
Okay, and extending skate relief, what's this?
Before my time, I've only been in the trust about 12 months, but before my time they created a really neat thing called Skate School, which is, I guess, for sport going forward, we're quite traditional, particularly in Christchurch, fairly traditional sort of way of delivering sport. A lot of kids don't want to play traditional sport. And so there was that non-activating, non-participating youth. But if you go to the skate parks, they're chocker. So what we've done is we've created sort of a model where we can take a skate school, literally, it's a trailer and a van into a school, set up a skate school rink, drop the sides of the trailer down and provide the kids with an opportunity to put rollerblades on or a skateboard and they go off. So 6,000 or 7,000 kids a year are getting it. So we had one model going anyway, but as a result of this we purchased another one, and so we've got two going across the city at the moment. And it's just a hoot to see. It's just a blast to see the kids playing. Oh, that's
cool. Yeah. Now, finally, if people are wanting to get into sport, how can they find out their options?
Dare I say it, the web.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way because you can do it from home. Really easy, or do it from work if you're allowed to do it from work. But onto the Sport Canterbury website or into any sport that you're interested in, they've all got good webs. So if you want to play indoor cricket at the moment, then you can get onto the Canterbury Cricket website and log in, or if you want to play a little bit of indoor football or whatever it happens to be, if you utilise the web and just defer into that, and that will give you a pathway into that.
Great. Geoff, good to have you on the programme. We'll catch up with you soon, actually, just to see how those new positions are going.
See how it's all working out.
Yeah.
Okay,
That'd be great. Thank you. Now, I've got to say, it's a rather stressful time living in Christchurch at the moment with all the aftershocks, and it seems like a perfect time to slip into old habits, such as smoking. Isn't that right, Mark?
I suppose a lot of people have thought about that.
Yeah, so at Smokefree Canterbury, what are the numbers? Have more people picked up smoking again?
I think there's been some stats that said there's been a slight increase, or if you look at the number of people who've rung the quit line, that's gone down a little bit, so that would tell you that possibly a few people have taken up the habit again or started smoking again because of the quake.
What is it about smoking that people sort of go to, when they're stressed? Why do they pick up the cigarette again?
Well, I think it's old comforts or things that they know and have used before that have helped them through stressful periods. So I suppose in those moments when you're stressed and, in those really, really moments where you can't think of doing anything else, that's the thing you go to. It's the easiest thing to go to. It's something you remember that you used to use to cope.
Yeah, and do you think, do you know what the numbers would be of people starting smoking after this kind, stressful time?
Relapsing, you mean?
No,
or
going, picking up for the first time, yeah.
For the first time, I don't know. I can't imagine there would be many, actually.
Really?
Not many people start in their adulthood. In their later years. Most people start when they're quite young. That's your story, wasn't it?
Yeah,
you started when you were quite young.
Now, Torun, you are an ex-smoker.
Yes.
How long have you been an ex-smoker for?
I'm very happy to say about 3 weeks this time. I did pick the cigarette up about 2 weeks after the February earthquake. I had made a New Year's resolution to give up smoking at the start of this year, which I did, and was very disappointed in myself when I did reach for the cigarettes at the end of the day. So I thought I need help, and I thought I'll go back to where I had given up previously, which was with my medical centre and the practice nurse, and they run a giving up smoking with habitual program here. Through patches and lozenges. Okay.
So you had given up for about 6 or more weeks after?
Yep. Yep. In the new year.
Yeah.
Just for health reasons, decided that's enough, want to quit. And so, yeah, as I say, when I picked it up again, very disappointed. It didn't feel good on them. Energy lapses. So once I've been on these, just find my energy's a lot more balanced, consistent. Yeah.
Were you surprised that you didn't sort of start smoking straight away after the earthquake? Or was, you say 2 weeks after the earthquake. Why was it 2 weeks after?
Because I was determined not to. I thought the earthquake's not going to make me pick them up again. But once again, for that reason, somewhere there was, I'll just have one, it'll be all right. And it's not all right. If I'm smoking, it's not 1 or 2. I end up sort of a packet, 20, and not good.
Is that a day?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah,
and I think
that's how addictive it is on me.
Yeah, right. A lot of people talk about that if you just had to have it one, and people were thinking that after the quake, one won't hurt, and why not? Because it's a stressful time, but that will bring back that addiction again, and those neurons in the brain to fire off, and before you know it, you're back to 20 a day. So
no
it sounds
control.
like you thought to yourself, no, I'm not going to let that happen.
Yep. Want to
stop. You know where it would lead to.
Knock it on the head. Yeah.
So, Mark, if other people like Torun, what would you say to them? Like, they've given up smoking, and because of the stress of the earthquake, they've picked it up again. I mean, Torun, she has stopped smoking again. But what would you say to the people who are still smoking?
Well, I think just do what Torun's done in her own mind, which is actually think, well, why take it up again?
Carry on.
That's going to be dangerous. And then thinking back to why I gave up in the first place. And for you, it was health reasons. For some people, it'll be the cost of smoking, which is getting more and more every day. Every year, we see the prices rising. And I think go back to those reasons, those personal reasons as to why you wanted to quit in the first place. And in fact, giving smoking again in response to the earthquake is only going to reinstate the addiction and probably make your problems worse, not better, in the long run.
Is it all about willpower, giving up?
No, I think it's all about willpower. I think you need to have that personal motivation, that conviction, the personal reasons to quit. And once you've got that, you need a bit of support as well. It's not about doing it all on your own, is it?
And that it's all right to ask for help. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, the other thing, when I was thinking of giving up again, I noticed a lot of advertisements for quit line and things like that. But I thought, no, I'll go back to where I went before, because it worked before, So it's just a matter of
getting
So you're on the Habitrol, which is good, and those are available.
Tell us about those.
Those are available, subsidised by the government now. So a lot of agencies in Christchurch still up and running, still providing services like the smoking cessation services and nicotine replacement therapy, patches, and you're on lozenge as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
Just help people with the cravings, and they're subsidised to a point where they're actually almost free, aren't they? I mean, $3.
Yeah, $3 for 1 week of patches.
Well, for $3 you probably can get a whole
for 12
week supply.
Gosh.
Which is a huge saving.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Exactly.
What a saving from buying those cigarettes.
And you're getting your help from the GP and a practice nurse. There's also a Kati Kaupaipa, which provides services for Māori, Pacific Island services. There's the quit lines you've mentioned. So it's a good time to quit. There's a lot of options for people still, even though a lot of what's been going on in Christchurch means that people have had to work differently, and some of the places aren't there that used to be there. But smoking cessation's still on the agenda.
Now, I'm just finally, how do you feel? 3 weeks
non-smoker? Oh, wonderful. I really do. And if I have been past someone who's been smoking, I can sort of smell it on them. Yeah, and that smell on the clothing, it just sort of don't want to go there. So
you're looking forward.
I'm sort of getting signals of yes, no, you're not going to, do it again. I need to put this on. Is it all right?
Yeah.
You've not put one on this morning
I'll just put the number of quit line out. That's 0800 778 778. You've got to put it on.
Great.
Yeah. And Torun's going to put her patch on.
Yeah.
So
just show you that it is simple. Yeah,
okay.
You do have to cut the package.
And childproof.
Yep.
Right.
Where are you going to put it?
And I'll just
you can put it on your arm.
Just on my arm.
Usual places
you
on
can
here.
put it arm. Is it hips?
Yeah, anywhere around here is good.
Yeah.
But you usually put it up here, don't you?
Yeah.
Let's put
so
a
be a good
patch
spot
on.
to put
And
it.
alternate too. Today it's the left arm.
Okay.
So you sort of remember.
So she's good to go now all day.
Good.
Yeah. And you just sort of hold it for a wee while.
Okay.
6 down.
And that's fine. And then you do have to dispose of
the
package. Although they even say when you take your patch off, hang on to this, put it back in there.
All right.
And then
well, good to have you on the program. Congratulations
Pleasure.
and good luck with that patch today. Good to see
Thank
you
you very
too,
much.
Mark. And that's quit line 0800 778 778. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to City Life and welcome to the program, Francis and Margaret. Now, you ran a nurses' workshop here in Christchurch yesterday. Francis, what was the idea behind it?
Margaret and I both have expertise and have done writings on the topic of nurses' role in disasters, psychosocial emergency response. And when the event happened, I contacted Margaret in regards to the College of Mental Health Nurses in New Zealand to see if we could, if she's willing to come and run some workshops with me in the country to support nurses but also give them some information and guidance on what they could be doing and also some skills for them on how to look after themselves and how to help their communities. And with the idea of running it nationally so that we could run it free for Christchurch nurses.
Great.
And it was just been overwhelming.
Now, Margaret, what's your background to come and do this workshop?
So probably for the last 4 or 5 years I've been involved in particular in psychosocial issues in emergencies. I've run training in a number of countries. I went over to China following the Sichuan earthquake to run training for... they were Chinese students over there. And then following the Victorian bushfires, I coordinated the Victorian government's psychosocial response to the bushfires for about a 12-month period. And I suppose in a very first-hand way worked with communities and worked with individuals who were really severely affected by what was a terrible emergency in our country.
Why is it important for nurses to be able to respond effectively at this time?
First thing is that nurses are often the first responders. They are, by sheer numbers, the ones that are frontlining our services. And secondly, they are the ones that have most interactions with people in distress, often through primary healthcare practitioners or community centres. And also they are great educators and they can support the key messages around what to do in emergencies and disasters, and particularly we need better education and psychosocial emergency support, which is it's a normal response to feel distress.
Yeah, so that was actually my next question, Margaret. What is the reaction in an emergency, in a disaster?
So people will have a wide range of reactions and emotions, and one of the strange things is actually the breadth of both physical feelings that people have. So in emergencies, adrenaline, a chemical in our body, increases, and it increases and stays raised for very long periods of time. And so people can have they have strange physical feelings. They can feel knots in their stomach for very long periods of time, have sleep disturbances, can feel on alert. You can feel hyper alert. Clearly people will be seeing enormous amounts of sadness and distress, but also anger and irritability. But in truth, sometimes people actually feel energised and motivated and feel as if they can do things that they weren't able to do before. And it's this what surprises people, because emergencies and disasters people aren't experienced with. People can be very surprised by their feelings and their emotions. And these feelings and emotions can shift over time quite a lot, and they last much longer than, people aren't surprised that you might be distressed for a few weeks. People are surprised to find those feelings and emotions can last for many, many months.
Now, Frances, what is psychological first aid?
Psychological first aid is basically tools developed on basically consensus evidence around some stages which basically first responders, so that not so many health professionals but people in the general public can be develop some skills in understanding some approaches to deal with people, assisting people to keep control of their lives. And it starts with basic things around knowing how to calm people, how to get back and reconnect with communities. So they're just very simple little tools that the community can use, and anybody can learn to actually work with people in situations like this. And it's surprising how when we've talked about this with the nurses, they've realised that most of them have learnt this many years ago in their basic training, and they said, oh, is that all it is? So they're just some simple activities and tasks and concepts that we go through with them.
And how are the Christchurch nurses?
The crisis. I mean, I think what we've picked up from the national is that everybody, all the New Zealand nurses that we've come across, have been had this feeling of wanting to support and wanting to know what to do. And the ones that we've also had a lot of nurses have come down to Christchurch through different teams and individuals to assist. We've also, by the fact that the large number that wanted to do their workshops in Christchurch and want more training, says that they're actually they are wanting to know more, they want to do more, but they've also done amazingly well. Amazingly well.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that they are supported and through education, but also they know how to look after themselves.
Okay. And finally, Margaret, some community messages.
Look, I think that it's important for people to firstly understand that their experiences are about being in an unreal experience, and they should understand that the way in which they're feeling will pass, even if it takes a long time. A few things that people can do to assist themselves is firstly talk about how they're feeling in their experiences. You know, see a counsellor if you want, but the truth is talking to a family member, talking to a trusted friend, sharing your experience with other people who've been through the experiences are actually some of the most healing things that you can do. Looking after yourself, it's a time to remember to make sure that you don't do too much, that you do take time out to find some pleasure in some activities as well. Eat well, try and get enough rest, give yourself permission to have some time out. After the bushfires, a woman who was living in difficult circumstances, back wanting to stay in her community, just found once a month she spoiled herself by going and booking into an expensive hotel quite a long way away that was unaffected. And she just went alone, and she had a room and a spa, and she read a book, and a weekend once a month was a fantastic way to re-energise her so she could continue working within her community and doing the things that she needs to do. So it is important that everybody thinks about spoiling themselves and looking after themselves whenever they get a chance.
And the other key message is that the majority of people going through this can do so just through their normal processes. They're going to come out of this.
Okay. Francis and Margaret, thank you both for coming on the program. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to City Life. Now, they say that good things take time, and Lisa, you would be the very right person to speak to about this. These are your creations?
They are. We make cheese on a farm in Marlborough, and yes, good things definitely take time.
Yeah. Now, you've been announced as the supreme winner at the Rural Women New Zealand Enterprising Rural Women Award 2011 with cheesemaking. What a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. I understand that it means that I'm supposedly the most enterprising rural woman in the country, which I think sounds very dangerous, and it sounds like I could get up to an awful lot of mischief. But
yes.
Yeah, it's basically a Rural Enterprise Award.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
What an honour for the South Island.
It was a complete shock. The lady, the local rep who lives sort of just across the bay from us, and she said if I didn't enter this year, she'd never speak to me again. So I did it to keep her out of trouble, basically. And then I got the phone call to say I'd been shortlisted for the South Island Award. And getting to the interview was rather fun. There was a fog down, and flying into Wellington is always entertaining. But I got there, and then I got the phone call to say that we were shortlisted, and we'd won. And then went to the National Award and stood up and talked in the national conference, and was so sure that the other guys were going to win that it was a complete shock when my name came out.
Yeah, because you won the South Island Award, and then you were, crowned.
Yes,
Rural
something
Woman
like that.
of the Year.
Yes, exactly.
Now, what does this mean now for you?
The best thing for me is it means that the business is recognised by somebody outside, because I live on a family farm, and I grew up with cheese making. I learnt from my mother and my grandmother, so I took it completely as normal, and I decided that farming was far too hard work, and I'd go overseas and get a proper job. So that's what I did, and I worked as a research scientist for a number of years. And then I came home to the farm about 7 years ago, and what happened was, farms are always short of labour, and I have two perfectly good brothers, but they've been looking after the place for a bit, and I decided to give them a year, and that's, as I said, 7 pushing up 8 years later. And now we look after tourists, and I teach cheese making, and we also supply restaurants from one end of the country to the other. Wow. And it's just something that I'm used to. And if you are working in a rural area and you don't know how you're doing, as I said, the thing for me for this thing was that somebody from outside has patted me on the head and say, actually, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that outside feedback, you have no idea. And if you're the sort of person like me, you only see the things that you could be doing better, or the things that you haven't quite finished yet, or the next project. So it's nice to take that time out and look at it and go, actually, that's rather nice.
Yeah, and what's the lady across the lake saying?
Yeah, she's lovely. She's been, as I said, pushing me into this for a number of years. I live in the Marlborough Sound, so we're sort of on one side of the bay and she's on the other side of the bay. And yeah, most of the people in the bay are actually my relatives. There's my mother and my 2 brothers and their families, and yeah.
Gosh.
But Pam is just on across the other water, so she's all to blame. I told her that.
Yeah. Did you get some cheese to thank her?
Yes, I'm sure there's that coming. But, yeah.
Now tell me, what are you going to be doing next with your title?
There's been an awful lot of PR stuff that I've needed to do, which is great because it gets me away from the farm, which, not that I don't love the farm, but it's really nice to have a break in routine. So I've had all sorts of random things like interviews from dairy magazines in the US by email, and Federated Farmers, bless them, are taking me up to Rotorua for dinner and the annual awards, which again is an excellent opportunity to get out of milking.
Do you have to milk the cows as well?
Yes and no. We actually produce cows and goats' milk cheeses, so up to 10 depending on the time of year. And we look after, as I said, lots of restaurants and anybody else who wants to know. So we make quite a different range, and the goat's milk is mainly sourced on farm. And I've got a new supplier who's coming online in the spring, which will save me a little bit because the hours are quite long and it's nice to be able to have extra milk when you need it. The cow's milk at the moment is sourced off farm from the neighbour down the road, but it's still warm. I send my long-suffering mother down to fetch it, and it's still warm from the animal when it goes into the vat. So it means I don't have to do that as well as make cheese. So we have a mixture of on-farm and bought in from the neighbour.
So tell me about this this dinner that you're going to be going to.
I know nothing about it except that I'm flying to Rotorua, and it's really lovely. I'm their guest, so I just said excellent opportunity to get away from the milking for another 24 hours.
Yeah, meet lots of lovely eligible farmers.
I grew up in a farming area, and most of them, as I said, related to me.
Okay. Let's stay away from that then.
Yeah.
So what is it about cheese making that you love?
I like feeding people, and as I said, with my heritage, I like to be able to keep the recipes going, because I learnt from relatives, from my mother, and I don't remember the first time I ever saw it done or made it myself. And there are a lot of traditional skills in my family running through, apparently, that I just took for granted. And it's partly because we're old-fashioned, and partly because growing up on a farm, they're practical skills that you use. I mean, nowadays we're terribly civilised. We're 10 minutes from the Queen Charlotte Walkway, which is a track that 30,000 people walk every year. And it's very much a tourism area, which is why we have lots of visitors. But when I was a kid, we used to go into town maybe every 4 to 6 weeks for things like 80 kilos of grain for the animals, that kind of stuff. Very unglamorous.
Sounds very like Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah, it sounds idyllic, and it was. It was a lovely idyllic childhood. Sometimes in the middle of winter, when the roads were bad, you sort of went, oh, wouldn't civilisation be nice? And I have lived in the city, so I have learnt to be civilised, but I actually do enjoy farm life. And
sounds like an ideal life. To be honest, near the Marlborough Sounds.
Yes, it is ridiculously pretty, and I never get sick of it. The sea always changes colour. It's brown currently because we had some rain. We had 7 inches of rain overnight, so the Pelorus River flooded and made it brown for a day or two. But generally it's a nice colour of green and flat, and it's very, very pretty.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on City Life, and congratulations. These cheeses smell lovely. Yeah, good to have you here, and best of luck at the dinner as well.
Thank you.
Now, next we have something a little different here on City Life. It's a new segment. It's our Canterbury business segment with someone you might just recognise, Geoff Morton.
My guest today is Cheryl Witham from the House of Travel in Christchurch. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you, Geoff.
Nice to see you.
Yes.
Now, today we're going to talk about river cruising.
A very nice subject to talk about today too.
It certainly is.
Yes.
Let's talk about where river cruising goes to and why river cruising.
River cruising has become very popular in the last few years. In fact, most of the ships that they use on the rivers now, there's nothing much older than the early 2000s. So it's become very popular with people who maybe have gone on coaches in the past or done the big ocean cruising, and they're looking for something different.
So when you are on a cruise on the river, of course, you're taken right into the middle of the continent, and you're taken right to the shores of the city, aren't you?
Absolutely. The ship, when it comes in, ties up right in the middle of the town. So if the difference to that in coach touring is you come in and you have to make your way into the cities in the coaches, and everyone knows what the traffic's like in Europe. Instead of this, you just cruise up to the side, tie up, and you're right there. So you literally step off and you're in the middle of most of the cities and towns.
And then, so where do you begin usually?
Generally speaking, that you would get off in the mornings and you'd go and do a walking tour of the city with a local guide. And so you'd walk around for an hour and a half. They'd tell you all the history of the actual town or city you were in. And then you're left to roam around. So the big thing with river cruising is that you've got a lot of freedom. So you can wander around, have a look at all the shops, go in and out of the cathedrals and churches, eat in the local restaurants if you want. Or you can go back to the ship for lunch.
Right. Well, you did say that there is an awful lot of freedom, but also the tours, they're free.
Well, they're all included, so that you don't, if you're used to coach touring or going on ocean cruising, you always got to do your optional excursions. Right. You have to prepay or buy those when you're there, and they can be quite pricey. So the walking tour gives you such a good look around that after that you're free to then do your own thing.
And of course, life on the... Well, it is a ship, it's not a boat, it is a ship, is that correct?
It's a ship. Most of them carry about 140, 150 people, so it's a really leisurely little community, and you actually get to recognise and know quite a few people on board. Right. You get a lovely cabin. It's like a ship cabin, quite roomy. They don't have a balcony, if you're used to... Right. Having a balcony. They have a small balcony, which is called a French balcony, which means it's only very narrow. And the reason behind this is because you go through locks. So if you had balconies, they'd be knocked off at the first set of locks.
Of course. And of course, all private facilities inside those cabins.
All private facilities, beautiful bathrooms. It varies with what ship you go on, exactly like cruising on the sea. But right. Beautiful big bathrooms, wardrobes. The great thing, of course, you unpack on day one and pack up at the end of the cruise.
Of course.
No early starts with your bags out at 6:15.
So in other words, if you're, for instance, on a coach tour, you're up in the morning at 5 o'clock, bags down, and long journeys, whereas with the river cruising, you're pulling into the city.
Absolutely.
And as you said, you've got your leisure at day. Even more leisurely than, say, a Mediterranean cruise on an ocean liner.
I think it is more leisurely because if you're cruising, for example, around the Med and you were going around Italy, if you wanted to go to Florence or Tuscany, you'd stop at Livorno, right. Which is a working port,
exactly.
And then you've got quite a distance to get to any of the places that would be of interest. If you go to Rome, you stop at Civitavecchia, which is about an hour and a half out of Rome, and so you've got quite a lot of travelling. Whereas with the river cruising, you can use the ship more. You can go on and off during the day. So if you did your walking tour in the morning, you could then wander around. You could come back and have lunch on board. You could have lunch at a local restaurant. And then even in the evening, if the entertainment that came on board didn't suit you, they bring local entertainment in and you can watch that or you can wander off.
So the timetable, say, for instance, when a ship pulls out at, say, 7 o'clock, it's not quite as tight on a river
No,
cruise.
And generally it wouldn't go around that time. Generally, if it was going to be there in the evening, it wouldn't leave till after midnight. So you can go off and wander around and enjoy it. That freedom word again, really.
So, in other words, there's not the pressure.
There's no pressure. There's not the pressure. I mean, obviously you have to be on the ship when it pulls out, but there's no pressure. Right.
Cheryl, let's have a look at some of the places that these river cruises take in. Now, where's that?
That's in Budapest, and it just shows you how close the river is to all the main attractions. So when you're tied up at the wharf, I think you call it a wharf on a river.
I think so, yes.
At your berth, that you literally right there. You're not having to head on a bus to the next spot, so you're right there.
Where's the next one?
And then coming
That's
up the river,
beautiful.
that shows you the boat there. So you can see, it looks, on the river they still look quite big, but they're quite narrow,
Yes.
about 440 foot long and narrow.
So in other words, you're home away from home.
Home away from home, that you don't miss anything being on those, being smaller if you compare it to a large ocean-going liner.
Right.
You're still getting the same kind of facilities.
Sounds fabulous. Where's that now? That's
It's coming back up Budapest
Budapest.
again, I think, looking at that. And it just shows you it's dwarfed by that city, but then it pulls also into some very small little towns as well.
So this is behind what was the old Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe. So
Yes.
it would be a safer way to travel if you were at all nervous.
It's a lovely way to travel. We've actually put together a trip next year, so we're going to have a
Right.
fully escorted tour on a 15-day Magnificent Europe on the ship that you saw there, one of the new ships.
Yes.
And that'll leave from Christchurch. It'll be escorted by a House of Travel person.
That
and
sounds
it will
fabulous.
take you right through a couple of nights in Singapore.
Yes.
Singapore Airlines, the cruise, and everything's included.
And that's how much, Cheryl?
It starts at $9,999, and you can talk to any of your House of Travels. Pick your favourite House of Travel, and they'll know all about it.
Sounds absolutely fabulous. I'm sold.
You're sold?
I'm sold. I'm absolutely sold, as I know you
I'll
will
put
be.
your name down straight away, Geoff.
Thank you, Cheryl. And so, therefore, for leisurely cruising on the Rhine, in Europe, on a houseboat, on one of these fabulous ships, go to House of Travel, go to your local House of Travel office and talk to Cheryl.
Welcome back to City Life, and finally on the program, our arts contributor Warren Feeney. Good to have you here.
Hi, Kaneda.
Now, we're looking at two exhibitions this week. The first one, jewellery.
Yeah.
Now, the National has been on High Street for the past 6.5 years and specialises in contemporary jewellery. What else in New Zealand or in Christchurch, where else can you get jewellery, art as jewellery?
Art is jewellery. Art is really high quality, serious jewellery. It's really mainly just at the National and also Fingers Gallery in Auckland. So it's an interesting gallery, the National, because, I mean, obviously at the moment it's relocating. So this show's a temporary show, pop-up exhibition, Caroline Billings. And essentially you're looking at a stable of artists in the same way that a dealer gallery has a lineup of painters and sculptors. Caroline Billings has around a dozen New Zealand jewellers, and they are people that exhibit internationally, through Australia and New Zealand. And all of them, I guess, all of them are relatively young. There's a strong Pacific content, not to every single one of them, but it's an important issue for them. And I think that, when you see the exhibition's running for 3 days in Paulson Street over in Addington, and when you see the work, the quality of the making is exceptional. But the other part of it is, I mean, a lot of the works in the show are brooches, and if you can think of a brooch as a very, very small painting, and I'm kind of reluctant to make that comparison because I don't want to sort of make this better or worse than sort of value judgment. This is jewellery, and it's every bit as interesting as anything you'll see when you walk into a gallery. So,
What's the state of, in New Zealand of jewellery in the serious art world?
It's an interesting one because what's happened in the last 10 years, there's been people like Damon Skinner, an art historian who started writing about craft and jewellery. He had a website, Power Dreams, which it's not running now, but basically that was probably, I think, the first instance where somebody started writing about jewellery really seriously, looking at the aesthetics, looking at the ideas, and publishing, and then also curating shows. So you've got it entering into galleries. Christchurch Gallery had an exhibition of craft last year, and that featured a considerable amount of jewellery. In a way, you could argue that jewellery is one step ahead of, say, weaving, ceramics, and, in fact, in a way, it's kind of providing a direction that those practices should really go in. And I guess, the other part of it, too, is the work that people are making in New Zealand. I think it's at a point now where you're going to see people developing serious collections of jewellery in the way that they've actually collected painting in the past. So it's at a really, it's not an exaggeration to say it's at a really dynamic and interesting stage. And I also would suggest that the National and the work that Caroline Billings has been doing is really important to that. So Christchurch is fortunate to have the gallery and fortunate to have her as an advocate for contemporary practice.
Just out of interest, do people actually wear it?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, because it is wearable. That's the thing, isn't it? It's not, you don't put it up on the wall. It is jewellery. It is meant to be worn, and it's just a way in which art reaches people in the community in a different way. You could argue it's more accessible. You're not going to a special white space, to view an exhibition. It's something that's an adornment that people can wear on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's so interesting, is it, to think of jewellery as art?
Well, it deals with, I think this is the other reason why it's become so critically important recently. A lot of the artists are using panamu, greywacke, they're using local materials, and the engagement of people like Rita Wilkinson, Pacific artist, it's actually very much about country's identity and using materials and shapes and ideas that express something about who we are. So it's the kind of thing, if you go to, say, an international craft fair, New Zealand jewellery stands up really well because it says something about the place and location it's come from. Actually, you can see this in Craig McIntosh is one of the artists. He has a solo show, so we can see that in his works. I think there's 3 images of them.
Okay, well, let's have a look at some of those works.
Okay, so this is a series of brooches by Craig McIntosh, and he's actually well known for working with panamu and greywacke stones. These works, not all of them, but some of them, he's also been using plastics as well as wood. And what he's interested in currently is he lives in Wellington and close to the beach, so he's been kind of gathering bits and pieces of objects and items that have been washed up on shore. And so he's crafted brooches and jewellery items based on those objects. So this is one. So he's been using driftwood, and he's also been using plastics. And I think that this is probably driftwood. So this is called Shotgun Shell 3. And, a brooch, very small piece, but just, absolutely beautifully made. I mean, they're very, very contemporary pieces. This is called Party Popper, and it's one of those party poppers. And you can see from this, in terms of the making, while he's working with very fine detail, great surfaces, really beautiful. Yes. And so immediately, just even discussing it with you now, we're looking at something really wonderful and quite serious as a piece of art.
Now, Renee Bevan.
Yeah, this is the other show. So if you're not familiar with the gallery or with the stable of artists, there's 12 artists, I think, currently she's representing, and we have images of 3 of them. So Renee Bevan's the first one, and this is resin and I think plastics. This is a brooch as well. It's an untitled piece, and actually it's interesting with this work and the other 2 that will follow because you get a sense of the dynamic, just the change in objects and items and materials that people are using. So the next work, this is Lisa Walker, and she's an artist who I think is exhibited in the Christchurch Art Gallery or is maybe intending to. This is actually a piece of a phone, I think from the 1950s or 60s. Oh. It's been cut, reshaped and rebuilt. And it's the largest piece too. You were saying about wearing them. This one's 15 centimetres long, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that could be heavy.
Okay, yeah.
And the final piece, this is a new artist that's entered the Nationals stable. This is Jackie Chan. She's living in Melbourne. And this is recycled materials too. And again, it's a brooch. I think it's a really...
That's pretty cool.
It is, yeah. It's really striking. Yeah. And again, coming back to you can wear it, but it's just such a nice piece to look at as well.
Yeah.
And interesting that there's so much in the way of recycling materials in these too. There's a sort of a political statement there about, let's not make something new and let's reuse it. Yeah, let's reuse it. It's a very strong part of it.
So it's the National Pop-Up Exhibition, Craig McIntosh and a group exhibition, until Sunday, 78 Paulson Street, Church Square, Addington, 10 a.m. until 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Now, we've got so much to talk about, I think we should have a break and then come back and chat with you. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to City Life, and we're still with our arts contributor Warren Feeney. Now, our second exhibition that we're looking at this week.
Yeah, well, this one's actually at the other end of the spectrum in a way to the previous show, because if those works we were looking at were sort of 2 or 3 centimetres, this is actually a whole gallery space. It's one work. It's an installation at the Jonathan Smart Gallery, and it's Judy Darragh and Rachel Shearer. Rachel Shearer is a sound artist, and Judy Darragh is an artist who, in the last 20 years, has worked with a lot of actually found materials and objects. I think she's an interesting artist because essentially all her work, and it's changed in the subjects, but all her work is domestic. It's stuff you're going to find in the home. It's also very cheap materials, and it's also recyclable materials as well. So, 20 years ago, she was working with really bad taste items like Barbie dolls, glitter, glow sticks.
That's not bad taste.
No, but what she did with them was,
oh, right, okay.
yeah. And she was, she went on from there to then use lino tiles and masking tape, coloured masking tape, and she constructed them using the masking tape into sort of Mondrian, abstract modern paintings, and, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but also making a serious point. This show, which is Data, is made out of the actual objects she's made are made out of straw, out of straws, coloured straws, and plumber's tape. And, I never thought I'd walk in and see fibre optic cable look heavenly, or even think that it was an item or a subject worth treating seriously. But this is kind of, I don't want to say it's a tribute to fibre optic cable, but it's never going to look this good again.
Yeah.
So that she's doing this in company with Rachel Shearer, who's a sound artist. So she has a career as a musician as well, 20 years doing soundtracks, and she's also recorded on Flying Nun. She had a girl gothic rock band back in the 90s, I think, as well, and she lectures at Elam. The two of them have worked previously. This show's called Data, so it fills the whole of the Jonathan Smart Gallery. So if we have a look at it, I'll talk about where it was previously exhibited.
Wow.
This is the show, and you can see that these straws, and they do look like fibre optic cables.
They do.
They're crawling up the walls.
Yeah.
And there's a soundtrack that Rachel Shearer's provided. And it's a soundtrack, a kind of an ambient soundtrack. I mean, I thought of Brian Eno, but it's quite random. There's sort of the noise of cicadas. So when you walk in, you're in this very kind of artificial environment, but you've got this kind of sound of the natural world around you. And it is kind of, it's sort of, one of the things I thought was interesting is it reminded me of a virtual reality, that people playing those PlayStation games and it puts them in a space where you're experiencing this virtual reality. I can't help but feel that one of the things Judy Durr is interested in is using such ordinary, disposable items and I guess working as an artist and making a statement that you can create, people can create those kinds of experiences really with their imagination and thinking. And, that's what artists do, craft up these beautiful objects, and it's not necessary to be using high tech. That's so the two together have worked on this kind of work before. This work was based on a project they did for sculpture on the Gulf on Waiheke Island.
Okay.
And the inspiration for it came from Judy Durr's comments that Waiheke Island is connected to the rest of the world through fibre cable. So she wanted to make a work that reflected that. So the cable made out of the straws was kind of wound around through the grounds and just across the landscape in Waiheke Island, and Shearer also then composed a soundtrack that went with it. So it's been shifted inside into Jonathan Smart's gallery, and it's different, I think, in this context because obviously it's an artificial environment, but it does work brilliantly, and the experience of going in and seeing it's well worth it.
Okay.
It's also going to a local primary school when it finishes.
I
so
think that's great.
Yeah.
They'll love it.
Yes, they will.
Especially the colours.
Yeah.
So that's called Data, a sound installation. Jonathan Smart Gallery. Now, where's that?
That's on England Street.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's until the end of June. Wednesday till Friday, 11 till 5 p.m. Saturday, 11 till 3 p.m. Warren, thank you so much for coming on the programme. Always enjoy it when you're here. And of course, you are you are the arts contributor for CC Magazine. So you've got your column in there about listings around Christchurch, what's going on. Now, this can be, if you haven't been able to pick up your copy of CC Magazine, because they've gone off the shelf pretty quickly, you can look up cbscene.co.nz and you can flick through the pages there. Or, of course, if you'd like to subscribe, email subscriptions@mainlandpress.co.nz. That is City Life for today. You can get episodes of City Life on demand now. All you need to do is go to ctv.co.nz and click on demand, and we have all the latest episodes of City Life there. You can get in touch with the program. Email me, kaneta@ctv.co.nz. Write to me, PO Box 1100 Christchurch, or of course call me 3777 033. Thanks for watching and have a good weekend.